Sterling Capital liked loud men. Men with polished shoes, expensive last names, and voices built to fill glass rooms before they had anything useful to say. I was not that kind of man. I was 28, worked 12-hour days, and spent most of them building models other people took credit for in cleaner shirts than mine. If a deal held together under pressure, there was a good chance someone like me had done the work nobody wanted to talk about out loud. That was fine. I had made peace with being useful instead of visible. Useful got you paid. Visible got you dragged into other people's games. The problem was, at Sterling I was visible anyway. Not because I was charming. Not because I played politics. Because one of the most powerful partners in the firm had once been married to my father. Her name was Claire Sutton, and in that building people said it carefully. She was 36, one of the youngest partners in the firm's history, and the kind of person who made everyone else start checking their own posture when she walked in. She never raised her voice. She never needed to. She had that kind of control that made other people nervous without understanding why. Perfect suits. Precise timing. No wasted words. Half the firm feared her, the other half copied her, and nobody really knew anything about her beyond the version she allowed in public. I knew a little more than most. Not enough to make it easier. My mother died when I was 14. My father spent years acting like grief was just another scheduling problem. Then, when I was 21, he married Claire. She was brilliant, self-contained, and only 8 years older than me, which made the whole thing feel stranger to everyone around us than it ever did inside the house. She never tried to play a role that would have insulted both of us. She was polite, distant, respectful in a way that kept a locked door between us. Then my father died too. And somehow, after all that, the cleanest place for both of us to hide was work. By the time I joined Sterling, she was already a rising force and I was just another analyst with a last name people recognized a second too late. We never discussed family history in the office. Not once. To HR, it was disclosed. To everyone else, it was background noise they pretended not to stare at. In meetings, she treated me exactly like she treated everyone else, maybe harder. I used to think that bothered me. Later I understood it was the only reason I survived there at all. The deal that changed everything landed on a Tuesday. A West Coast infrastructure client was looking at a move big enough to reshape half our quarter. And the room assigned to the project was packed with the usual men who expected to matter. Senior associates. Directors. One managing principal who had spent 10 minutes talking before the meeting and still hadn't said anything specific. I was there because I had built the downside scenarios over the weekend and my manager wanted me available in case someone needed the numbers explained in smaller words. Claire stood at the end of the table, one hand resting near a stack of printed briefing books. "We leave for San Francisco on Thursday," she said. "I'm taking Daniel Caldwell with me." For about 2 seconds, nobody moved. Then someone gave a short laugh like she had to be joking. She wasn't. Richard Baines, a senior vice president with the kind of tan that looked expensive and dishonest at the same time, leaned back in his chair. "Daniel." He said my name like it had shown up in the wrong column. Claire didn't even look at him. "His risk structure is the reason we caught the downside exposure before the client did. He knows the model better than anyone in this room." That should have ended it. At a normal firm, maybe it would have. At Sterling, it was the start of the real meeting. Nobody openly argued with her, because that would require saying maybe the quiet analyst in the corner deserved the seat. Instead, the silence changed shape. Little looks passed around the table. Tight mouths. People writing nothing in notebooks. I felt it all at once. Not just surprise, but the easier story they had already chosen. Not merit. History. Not skill. Favor. After the meeting, I barely made it to the coffee station before I heard my name behind me. "Big week," one associate said. "Must be nice," another answered. I kept walking. An hour later I got the official travel email. Flight, hotel, client schedule, internal prep dinner. My hands were steady when I opened it. They weren't steady after. Because the truth was, I didn't know either. I knew I was good. Better than most of the men who had smirked in that room. I knew the model was mine and the work was clean. But when the person choosing you is tied to the worst and most private part of your history, certainty gets harder to hold. Late that evening, As the office thinned out and the city outside turned gray-blue through the windows, I saw Claire step out of her office and stop by my desk. "Be ready at 6 Thursday," she said. "And Daniel?" I looked up. "Do not go to San Francisco trying to prove you belong there. You either do or you don't." Then she walked away before I could answer. That was the kind of thing she did. No softness. No explanation. Just one sentence that stayed under your skin for hours. I stared at my screen after she left, while the whispers kept moving through the floor like bad air. In 48 hours I'd be on a plane with the woman my father married, heading into the biggest deal of my career, while half the office waited for me to fail in a way that made their version of the story true. The trip started going wrong before we even left Seattle. Our first flight got delayed 40 minutes because of fog. Then the gate changed twice, which turned the terminal into a slow-moving stampede of irritated people dragging carry-ons into each other's ankles. I spent most of that time pretending to review our client packet while really trying not to notice how many people around us kept glancing between me and Claire like they were trying to solve a puzzle. She handled airports the same way she handled boardrooms. No wasted motion. No visible irritation. Navy coat, black carry-on, phone in one hand, eyes already 3 steps ahead of whatever problem was coming next. At one point, while we were standing near the new gate, she said, "Baines called me twice this morning." I looked up from my tablet. "About the model?" "No. About whether you were ready." That got a short laugh out of me before I could stop it. "And what did you tell him?" She slid her phone into her bag. "That if he had questions about your work, he should have raised them before I put your name on the travel list." There was nothing warm in the sentence, but it stayed with me anyway. By the time we landed in San Francisco, the day had already started to feel compressed, like somebody had taken a normal work trip and tightened every screw. Our client moved the prep dinner up by an hour. One of the briefing books had to be reprinted because the updated debt assumptions hadn't synced across the final version. Then the car service got caught in traffic, which meant Claire and I ended up in the back of a cab with our bags wedged between us while she answered emails and I rebuilt a sensitivity table on my laptop with bad signal and my knee pressed against the door. The dinner itself was all polished smiles and expensive plates nobody touched. I spoke twice, both times because Claire turned the conversation toward me with surgical precision and left me no room to hide. I could feel the client measuring me at first, probably wondering why the youngest person at the table was there at all. Then I walked them through a stress path on municipal exposure, and the older man across from me stopped looking at Claire for confirmation and started asking me direct questions. That should have calmed me down. Didn't. By the time we got back outside, it was close to 11 and the air had turned cold in that sharp San Francisco way that made the city feel cleaner and harder at the same time. The hotel lobby was crowded, understaffed, and somehow louder than the restaurant had been. Claire handled check-in while I stood off to the side with our bags. I knew something was wrong before she turned around. "What happened?" I asked. Her expression barely moved. "Convention spillover. System error. They gave away the second room." I stared at her. "What do you mean, gave away?" "It means," she said evenly, "they have one room left." For a second I honestly thought she was going to tear the front desk apart with nothing but eye contact. The clerk was apologizing too fast, offering points, upgrades, free breakfast, anything except a second room that did not exist. My first reaction was not practical. It was pure panic. "We can't do that." Her gaze shifted to me. "Do what?" "Stay in one room. Daniel, it is almost midnight. We have the client meeting at 8. "That's not the point." "No," she said quietly. "I know exactly what the point is." That shut me up. We took the key. The elevator ride was silent except for the mechanical hum and the sound of my own pulse in my ears. I kept thinking about Seattle, about Sterling, about how one wrong detail could turn into a whole invented story before we even got back. The room was bigger than I expected and somehow worse because of it. One bed, one couch, one lamp left on near the window. Her suitcase stopped by the desk. Mine stayed near the door like I was ready to flee. "I'll take the couch," I said immediately. She set down her bag. "Fine. That should have been the end of it. But the room changed the air between us the second the door closed. No assistants. No glass walls. No titles to stand behind. Just the two of us, exhausted and boxed into the kind of situation both of us would have avoided at any cost if the day had left us any choice. I loosened my tie and sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the carpet. After a minute she said, "You think I made a mistake bringing you?" It wasn't a question. I looked at her. She had taken off her blazer, and without it she looked less intimidating, not softer exactly, just more human than the office ever allowed. "I think," I said slowly, "that I've spent 2 days wondering whether I'm here because of my work or because of my last name." She held my gaze for a long time. "Your last name has made your life at Sterling harder, not easier." I didn't answer. Then she said, "Your father never understood you." That hit harder than I expected. "You knew that. I lived with both of you." The room went quiet again. I leaned back, rubbed a hand over my face, and before I could stop myself I said, "After my mother died, he acted like efficiency was the same as care. Like if he kept moving, nobody could accuse him of failing." She looked down at her hands. "He was not good with grief." "No," I said. "He was good at avoiding it." For the first time all day, something in her composure slipped. "Not much, just enough." "My family," she said, "did not believe in visible weakness. Perfection was the price of being taken seriously." Then I entered finance and learned that if I was flawless, people still resented me. They were just quieter about it. I gave a tired laugh. "You hide it well." "I know." There was no vanity in it, just fact. I don't know what changed after that. Maybe it was the hour. Maybe it was the room. Maybe we were both too tired to keep performing old roles that had stopped fitting years ago. But we kept talking. About my father. About the years after. About what it did to a person to spend too much of life being useful and controlled instead of known. At some point the lamp was the only light left in the room. At some point I realized I was no longer speaking to the woman who used to stand in my father's kitchen in perfect clothes and careful silence. I was speaking to someone who had built herself into armor because she had never been given the luxury of being anything less. Nothing happened. That was the unbearable part. Nothing happened, and yet when morning came, and she was standing by